Welcome to the Indiana Department of Education's Professional Development on Data-Driven Instruction and Targeted Intervention, Remediation, and Enrichment. Data-driven instruction. Now, it's a term frequently thrown around in the world of education, but if you have ever sat down to have a true data-driven conversation with colleagues, you know just how challenging it can be. But data-driven conversations and data-driven instruction are really the backbone of effective teaching and vital to ensure success for all students. There are 4 objectives regarding data that we will be covering throughout this conversation. Firstly, we will define what data-driven instruction truly means. Next, you will gain a better understanding of why data collection is so important in your classroom and understand how using data will improve your overall instruction. Finally, you will learn about what types of data to collect and how often you should be collecting it within your own classroom. Now let's get started and dive right into data-driven instruction. What does data-driven instruction mean to each of you? Discuss with the people around you each of the questions that you see on the screen. Talk about what is data-driven instruction and what types of data do you need in your own classroom? How often do you believe you need to collect data, and why is it such an important part of instruction? Take notes on your thoughts so that you can share out with the whole group. Take about 10 minutes now to discuss this amongst yourselves. I hope you are able to have some meaningful conversations around data. Now that you have defined it amongst yourselves, we will discuss one particular definition. Data-driven instruction is a process in which teachers analyze data from formative assessments to determine if their instruction is moving students towards mastery of a learning target. There are many ways to define data-driven instruction, but this is just one way that encompasses the term as the continuous process that it really is. This process allows teachers to determine their next instructional steps, as well as identifying those students needing intervention or enrichment with that particular learning target. We will come back to this idea of intervention and enrichment later. Creating strong learning targets and objectives are really the first step when it comes to data-driven instruction. These will be the building blocks of the lesson as well as the assessment process. Now that we've defined what data-driven instruction is, we need to look at why we should collect data and why it's so vital in your own classroom. First and foremost, it measures student progress and it gives you the ability to gain a snapshot of where your students are academically at that particular moment. It also ensures that all students are moving forward academically and really ensuring that students aren't staying stagnant in their growth. Without data, it's very difficult to know if students are moving forward like this. Data collection also measures instructional effectiveness to see if your instruction is reaching the students, which leads into the fact that data also allows for instructional reflection. You are able to see if your instruction is effective or if there is something that needs to be altered. It's always necessary to take a critical look at your teaching based on the data you receive. With each new group of students, you will need to be flexible and willing to make tweaks and edits. Additionally, data collection helps maintain an educational focus. It's easy to get off track with distractions in the classroom and around the school, but data will help keep you on track and serve as a concrete goal for you as well as your students. Data collection helps guide curricular decisions within your classroom, and it also helps assist in resource allocation so that you know where to devote more of your attention. As you all know, it's not possible to be everywhere at all times, but the data can help pinpoint which students need additional support and what type of support they need, whether this is intervention, remediation, or enrichment. And finally, data exposes trends in your own classroom. Whether you see a trend that a particular standard was not mastered by a majority of the class, or a certain group of students struggled overall with the content. We're going to revisit the graphic in the middle and discuss how data collection should be a continuous cycle in your classroom. Here you'll find a short video on the effective use of data. You will see an elementary school in Rhode Island show an effective use of data using the entire school community, including the teachers, principal, and other support staff. I hope that the video shows you how much data can improve your academic performance with your students. Now let's talk about how data really should shape your instruction. You may have seen the graphic on the left side of the screen in the past. The cycle shows that data-driven instruction is truly a continuous process. The process involves the collection of data, the analysis of the data, making instructional decisions, planning, and reflecting. At that point, you are back to the next round of collecting data, and the process is going to go on throughout the entire school year whenever you're introducing new content. All parts of this cycle are absolutely critical. Obviously, your lessons must be very well planned and aligned to the Indiana academic standards and match the rigor level set by the standards. The next piece is that the assessment should match and measure the learning objectives for each of the standards. The Indiana Department of Education website has released item specifications for the iLearn assessment that includes the depth of knowledge that is required on the test, as well as details regarding the various types of test questions that will be used. Creating assessments that match the learning objectives to the proper DOK and rigor level can be extremely difficult, but using the IDOE math and literacy frameworks can be an additional tool to help with this process. It's also critical to objectively analyze the data and look for misconceptions and trends, as well as to look hard at the validity of the assessment and learning needs. You have to be able to look at your assessment and decide whether it was a true measure of the student's mastery and knowledge. If you work in PLCs or teams, you're able to work together to pick apart all of your assessments, and you have the benefit of multiple points of view on whether your questions truly assess the standards. If you do not teach the same subject as others at your school, it can be beneficial to have a colleague look at your assessment to get another set of eyes and some feedback. Reflecting on instructional shifts needed to ensure student mastery of learning targets is also critical to meet the needs of all students. You also must need to be able to constantly implement changes based on the analysis of the data and reflection of these instructional shifts. You know how important flexibility is within the classroom and the constant push for making changes based on what is best for each of your students. As you can see, data really is information. It's absolutely vital information within your classroom, and the more data you have, the more empowered you are to move forward with decisions that positively impact your students. With all of this being said, formative classroom assessments are really the backbone of analyzing data. They are key when it comes to instructional practices. Think of formative assessments as regular doctor checkups. The doctor can find any minor issues and treat you on the spot. For formative classroom assessments, you want to know what is happening in your classroom in real time and working with the data as you receive it. By the time the state assessment occurs, it's too late to make instructional changes to benefit your students. The data should really be utilized as a tool to drive student mastery of learning targets, and like I said earlier, it should be collected and analyzed while the learning is happening and not the end of the learning. It's too late by the time the end of the year rolls around to make any changes because you are about to get a brand new set of students. Continuing on with the question of how often should you be collecting data and what type you should be collecting, discuss your thoughts with the people around you about how often you should be collecting data from summative assessments, benchmark assessments, common formative assessments, and formative classroom assessments. Think about how often you are currently using these assessments in your own classroom, as well as the frequency around the school. Discuss this for the next 10 minutes with the people around you. Like you saw on the last slide, there is a data pyramid that shows how often you should be collecting data on the various forms of assessments. As you may have seen, formative classroom assessments are the most frequent. These are those quizzes, bell ringers, exit tickets, etc. You should be collecting some form of data from these formative assessments daily, and it should guide your instruction for the next day and next lesson. As you move up the pyramid, you see common formative assessments, which should occur about every 3 to 4 weeks. The data on these assessments should be compared with other teachers that have given that exact same assessment. The assessment should also be given within a day or two of the others in your group in order to accurately compare the data. Now, when you think about summative assessments, those are happening less frequently than your common formatives. These typically happen at the end of a unit or even semester. For those of you teaching middle or high school, these would be your teacher-created final exams. At the top of the pyramid is that state assessment. You know the state assessment occurs at the end of the school year and it only happens once. The data on this assessment is important, but like I said earlier, you're not able to make adjustments for your students based on that data because you're going to have a brand new set of students the following year. How do we have an effective data discussion with our colleagues? The video here provides a great example of a productive data discussion resulting in a targeted plan for reteaching and remediation. While you're watching, think about how you can utilize the techniques in this video within your own school or PLC. There are an abundance of resources out there that you can find regarding data. These resources here really just scratch the surface of what is available. Use these to help you get started. You will find online assessment tools, but it's important to always vet any test questions you use. You want to ensure that your test questions are aligned to the Indiana academic standards. The true key is to always focus on the data and do what is best for your students. Now use this time to collaborate with your team. Discuss with your team how you can start having meaningful data meetings. Do you need to establish norms or expectations for these meetings? How can we get everyone on board with this? And how can we begin the mind shift of using data to change instructional practices? Take a few minutes to discuss these ideas. Now that we have had a chance to discuss all things data, we need to talk about how exactly we move forward with this data we collect. I mentioned earlier that data will help guide your curricular decisions and expose trends. Once these trends are exposed, we need to begin the intervention, remediation, and enrichment portion of the lesson. When you start reviewing your students' data, you may have found yourself asking a similar question to this. What's the difference between targeted intervention, remediation, and enrichment, and how am I supposed to know which one to be implementing? You are not alone in this, and it can be confusing to know where to go once you have all of this data in your hands. The most important thing is just not to just sit on it. We are going to talk about each of these strategies and when it is best to implement each of them. Let's first start with remediation. Remediation is frequently driven by some sort of formative classroom assessment, like a bell ringer or quiz or exit ticket. It is when you quickly reteach the content to a group of students in a different way. Every student who did not master the content the first time around should be receiving some form of remediation. There is not a one-size-fits-all remedy for teaching, and not every student is going to master the content the first time around, so effective remediation is key in the classroom. It can sometimes seem overwhelming to think about reteaching concepts over and over in your classroom, but this is really the natural progression of teaching. Most effective teachers utilize remediation naturally because they are constantly doing what is best for all students. Teachers do not want to leave students behind, so they have an ongoing remediation process within their classroom. Now that we have discussed what remediation is, we will move on towards targeted intervention. Targeted intervention is a formal process implementing research-based instructional strategies. It's an integral part of both RTI, or Response to Intervention, as well as MTSS, Multi-Tiered System of Support. Targeted intervention is more skill-specific than remediation, and it's absolutely imperative that progress is closely monitored throughout this process. This type of intervention typically serves about 5 to 15% of students, and if your group gets significantly larger than that 15%, you would need to look at remediation instead of targeted intervention. This chart shows you the difference between remediation and intervention. The core of each of the terms is really the same, where students did not experience success on the concept the first time around. Let's first look at the green boxes. When a large majority of students require a fresh approach in order to understand the concept, you will want to use remediation, meaning you will pause whole group instruction to try out a new method, formatively assess success, and adapt as needed. Your goal is to get the class back on track with 80% of students ready to move forward with more advanced standards and eventually continuing on with mainstream core instruction. Now look at the blue boxes on the right. When a small number of students are struggling to understand the concept and underlying skills are required, you will want to use intervention. This type of intervention occurs during a small group time that you have allotted and protected within your own classroom. You will want to deliver focused instruction to close any learning gaps and move those students towards mastery and success. After that, you will want to continue to monitor progress and keep using research-driven interventions. Notice how there are arrows that take you from one side to the other. For example, once you have continued with progress monitoring after intervention, you will continue on with mainstream whole class instruction. Now, this graphic shows the difference between Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction. Tier 1 instruction is the majority of your instruction. That is the research-based core instruction that is for all students. That Tier 2 instruction is that targeted intervention that is directed at those students who are at risk. Here's where you need to use that frequent progress monitoring to ensure they are mastering the concepts. On the top of the pyramid, you see the Tier 3 instruction, which is that intensive intervention for individual students. As you move up the pyramid, you are targeting smaller and smaller groups of students. You will also see behavior interventions on the right side of the pyramid, which are very helpful when planning instruction. Moving on to the third group, enrichment. Most teachers are more familiar with enrichment, but it's extremely important to know that all students deserve to be enriched. It doesn't matter their academic level, each student needs some form of enrichment within the classroom. One example of this is project-based learning. The video here shows you enrichment in action with students at different grade levels. Take note of the strategies the teachers are using with their students. At the end of the day, we need to cultivate all students to be thinkers and problem solvers. Based on the video, discuss the questions on the screen. What exciting ideas did it spark for you? What type of changes do you feel that you could really implement tomorrow? What lingering questions do you still have about this topic? And what changes do you think you could start working on tomorrow that would require more long-range planning? Take a few minutes to discuss these questions with the people around you. We have discussed the importance of data, but let's talk about why we use data to actually group students. There are many reasons we do this. It helps us identify learning gaps within our classroom. It helps us improve that Tier 1 instruction, and it provides an idea where your lessons may need some editing. It also helps us measure growth and provide feedback to both students and other teachers. The data also helps us group students with a like need to focus instruction. Grouping students with similar data will help you create instruction that is specifically targeted to areas of need. Another reason is that it will help guide any necessary instructional changes. And finally, it will give you the ability to make decisions based on student readiness, helping you recognize when to move forward with your instruction. Let's take a little bit of time to reflect. Take this time to talk to those around you about what your current school or grade level is doing with remediation and intervention time. Really ask yourself if you have a devoted time in your schedule for this targeted intervention. Is this time always protected? And ask yourself if you're using this time in the best possible way, or if there are changes you could implement to make it more beneficial. Here's another link to multiple resources from the IDOE. The link holds resources for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 instruction. Hopefully you're now feeling more comfortable with data and you have seen the importance of using data for intervention, remediation, and enrichment. Thank you.